The 5th annual New Paradigms for Using Computers workshop, hosted by IBM fellow Ted Selker, manager of the IBM User System Ergonomics Research Lab, was held on July 24, 1997. Through intellectually stimulating presentations and discussions, this community of leading visionaries explored innovative ideas focused on future development in human-computer interface design. There was a strong emphasis on social responsibility and the construction of new computer technologies designed to enhance our environments of learning and leisure. This year's presenters represented the global think tank for the growing human-computer interface field. Presenters included Ted Selker from IBM, Will Wright from Maxis, Jim Sporer from Apple, Oliver Selfridge from MIT, Bill Buxton from SGI, and industrial designer Richard Sapper. The workshop began with a discussion among past year's presenters. Oliver Selfridge challenged the panel to predict computer technology 25 years into the future.
In 25 years, I would like to think that there won't be any things called computers sitting on desks, but, you know, they'll all be, gee, why can't IBM make a good HP 200LX? They'll be sort of built into you and you won't even know they're there. They'll be in your glasses. Some of you may have had the experience of losing accommodation and having to deliberately focus on things or use bifocals or something. And if you had the right kind of glasses, you wouldn't have to. I should think it's rather easy to make this, and you would make many billions of dollars overnight. But how come the future is taking so long? In other words, all the technology for making wearables has been here for 10 years. There's a laptop you can put on your belt, but it's just all taking too long. That's my complaint.
I also think we're going to have lots more of what I might call diffusion quakes, sociological quakes associated with rapid change. For example, the Internet's been around for 25 or 30 years in some form, the ARPANET, the Internet. But it really only took off in a noticeable way in the last 5 years because everything was pre-charged, everything was ready, all the technologies were there, and we finally had some ways to begin to use it. And we're going to see more and more of that kind of rapid change happen, where you've got these large potential gaps where the technology is potentially very, very advanced, but the large user population isn't ready to use it yet. And we'll see work like Ted's teams begin to make it possible for people to bridge that gap.
I don't predict the future, but I have a friend who does. And his prediction of the future is really simple. The future will be just like the past, except more complicated. And that all of the visions of the future, of the things that we'll have in the future, tend to leave out that we'll also have all of the things that we have now, too. So when I work on standards, I think about the paradox of bringing things together, that if you have 12 things that are all different, and the problem is they're all different, that a lot of the temptation is, well, you build another thing, and that will bring them all together, but usually you wind up with the 13th thing instead. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And 4 years ago, there was a RFC on network information systems, and we had the WACE and Gopher and Hyper-G and WWW, and now we just have WWW. So see, wasn't the 13th thing. So, but often it doesn't happen that way, and so that's the problem when the world is more complicated, because that's really the main thing you want to do is make it simpler. And adding more things usually just makes it more complicated.
I'd like to talk about a 1961 world of the future and which part of it has been realized and which part has yet to be realized. And I gave a talk at MIT in 1961, and I was talking about the time at which everything published would be on the computer, and people would get suitably paid for what they published. And also that it would always be possible to immediately comment on anything that had been published. And I thought that this would improve politics because it seemed to me that there was a fair amount of hit-and-run politics where you said something bad about the other guy, relying on the fact that he would not be able to reply quickly. So that was the technological dream. And a part of this has been realized with the web. Anybody can publish. And of course, how many people will read it depends on how interesting it is and what publicity it gets. So anyway, part of this 1961 world of the future is the world of the present, and another part of it is still the world of the future. And I'm hoping that we'll have it in the rest of it, in another 10 years. But there does still have to be worked out a mechanism whereby somebody who is a professional writer can write for stuff that is published on the web and hope to make no worse an income than writing for print publication. And since the publishers ought to be squeezable quite a bit between the writers and the readers, it seems to me this is a realistic objective.
The day's discussions evolved from the hypothetical to the concrete, with an emphasis on the creation of computer-based systems of inherent social value and responsibility for its users. Richard Sapper's presentation, Perspective for Design in the Near Future, raised the ever-important issue of designing with human needs as a priority. This topic seamlessly set the stage for the final wrap-up discussion. Martin Haberle of Netscape opened the discussion with his question, how do we know what users want?
One of the challenges is how do we know what users want, especially as we go into an economy that has more and more users of more and more products. And from my perspective, there are some new opportunities. We've begun to see some people realize these opportunities by mining the data, at least in the electronic and software product space, that can come back to producers or innovators or creators or entrepreneurs through electronic media.
How to know what the people want is naturally a very complex thing, because usually the people do not know what they want. And if we want to know before we go on the market what the people want, then we start to make usually such focus groups, analysis, and they don't work. They cannot work because they cannot predict what the public will want in 2 years. In the car industry, this is a very well-known phenomenon, because it is a completely different thing seeing a car on the road the first time or having it seen for half a year. When you have seen this car for half a year, you look at it with completely different eyes from when you have seen it for the first time. So it is virtually impossible to find out before if the people would want this car or not. You have to believe in it. And there has to be somebody who says, I take the responsibility. I think I know that this is a good car, and I'm going to make it like this, and I believe in it, and I will convince the people to buy it.
My vision of society today, substantially less willingness to go along with some engineer's decision about what's marketable, and yet sometimes new technology takes a long while to be accepted, and companies won't accept it these days. Many of you may remember the first ATM machines, which were in 1973 about, they started. The discussions that went on them about their unreliability, I remember my first wife saying, I would never trust depositing cash in, and then everybody was saying that people like to talk to tellers. Well, come on, it's all garbage, and but it does take time, and it really took like 20 years. And you're right, but I don't know if the equivalent of ATM started today when there weren't any. I'm not sure that any of the big companies we work for or know would allow that kind of time or investment. So I'm all for you, but I think the ideological changes in the companies would preclude that kind of investment.
It seems to me that as a technology company, you have to be not just you can't view yourself as a technology company. You have to view yourself as a service company and understand the application of your technology better than your customers. Be on top of it so that you can actually lead and educate. So there's a training thing here. Now let's look at and that's different than the arrogance of saying I know better than my customers. It's actually basically I've done my homework so well that the expertise rests as much with us. In high-tech companies right now, especially software companies, that is generally not the case. And if you look at it, it's little wonder why. I would guess that 95% of computer science graduates in this country graduate even at the graduate school level without ever having written a program that was ever used by another individual, much less being evaluated on the success of that. And so we get what we deserve. It's not a priority. The number of departments in undergraduate, much less graduate school in computer science or engineering that have user interface recognized as a legitimate discipline and where design is something which is a prerequisite to graduation, there are virtually none. And again, we get what we deserve if those are the values that we put forward. Now, that's not to say that a computer scientist has to be a human factors expert, but they certainly have to understand their role in this overall process. And until we actually start to give respect and credibility to human-centered design, where you can actually go through and even have some criteria and recognize that everybody isn't an expert on user interface design, whereas in fact I think they are. My own company is a good example. If I go into the rendering group, they will tell me all the time about how the user interface should be. But if I went and told them about the rendering, that they don't know what they're talking about, it would just not be permitted. I mean, it's just there's no respect for the profession because the profession hasn't defined itself.
How do we know what people want? Well, everybody wants something different, and there's the massive amount of stuff as we get the economy more efficient. Everybody will be able to get what they want. That's one theory. There's this other part, though, that everybody wants what the culture wants, and it's so amazing to me. If there's this wonderful book called The Knowledge Value Revolution. If you read it, they trace the evolution of various economic cultures through history. And you run across these things like the potlatch culture, where the important thing was to give away everything. And I think it's a good thing for us to shake up our thinking a little bit if we're trying to think about new paradigms by looking at some of the alternative cultures and value systems that have existed and really realize that our culture is really just this socially constructed thing that's here for now, but it's not here forever.
For more information about the workshop proceedings and a 1-hour documentary video, please make note of the following contact information.